Good evening, and thank you for joining me. Today we are going to be talking about saving the North Atlantic right whale. Now, we're going to start by discussing biodiversity loss. But first of all, before we can talk about biodiversity loss, what does biodiversity in itself mean? Well, biodiversity accounts for all the species, genetic diversity, and ecosystems on the planet. Each of these levels of biodiversity is complicated and interdependent. All species on the planet are interconnected to one another in vital relationships, and when one species is affected by biodiversity loss, it affects and weakens the ecosystem around them. And this is why biodiversity loss is so important to recognize and also act upon. Now, the decline or disappearance of biological diversity, understood as the variety of all planet on Earth, life on the planet, is what the definition of biodiversity loss is. In 2019, the United Nations produced a report on biodiversity that said that out of 8 million species on the planet, 1 million of them are in danger of becoming completely extinct. That is a huge and very scary number. The primary drivers behind biodiversity loss are many. They are habitat loss, invasive species, pollution, climate change, and overexploitation of these animals and the resources where they live. Now, the drivers of these are increased consumption, increased human population, which increases the consumption, and resource efficiency or lack thereof. Now, today we're going to specifically be talking about the North Atlantic right whale and what is the North Atlantic right whale and why are they so important to us and our marine ecosystems? Well, the North Atlantic right whale, which I'm going to just summarize and say that I'm going to call them the right whale instead of the entire North Atlantic right whale because that's a mouthful, but they are a baleen whale, and they're one of the most endangered large whale species on the planet today. They have less than 350 individuals remaining and less than 100 breeding females right now. They were referred to as the right whale because they were the right whale to kill by poachers back in the day because they floated once they were killed and they were really easy to harvest. So they harvest for their blubber. So that's what they were known as, the right whale. Now, sadly, by the 1890s, they'd been hunted to the brink of extinction, which is so, so sad. And their numbers have never come back today, which is why we're having this discussion. They live in the Atlantic coastal waters around New England and Canada for most of the year, but then they travel south to South Carolina, Georgia, and northeastern Florida to their calving grounds. Now, what if we lose the right whale? It would be devastating, and the reason is because they are a keystone species. What does that mean? Well, they are an ecosystem engineer, and what they do is they create a habitat for other marine wildlife, and the wildlife that they create the habitat for typically thrive. They're crucial to the overall survival of other species, and without the right whale, marine ecosystems they live in could collapse completely. They could kill off other species and weaken other species, and they could destroy the food web that so many animals depend on. They also directly help to fight climate change, which is very interesting. Now, how do they specifically contribute to their marine ecosystem? Well, they have something called plumes, which is just their gassy feces, their gassy underwater feces, but they are extremely beneficial to the marine ecosystem. Now, their plumes fertilize the ocean and feed and stimulate the growth of phytoplankton. In turn, phytoplankton turns around and produces up to 50% of the world's oxygen, which is massive. Phytoplankton provide the base of healthy marine food webs, which is so important because so many people and individuals and species rely on them for survival. Also, the right whale absorbs massive amounts of carbon dioxide from their environments, which directly helps to fight that climate change. Now, for this audience, my main target audience is going to be the general public, because when there are a lot of people and they're passionate about something, it is really hard to ignore them. I'm planning on starting with the younger generation with their ability to use social media and spread the word about the North Atlantic right whale. And this will information will leach up to the older generations, and soon enough there will be public outcry on behalf of the right whale. Now, looking at this graph, I break it down into human factors that are depleting the numbers drastically of the North Atlantic right whale, the efforts that are going on right now to preserve this beautiful species, and the factors that we already talked about how they affect their marine ecosystems. So the negative factors that are driven by human beings today that is reducing the numbers are ship strikes, which are huge. They are often killing or very badly injuring the North Atlantic right whale, entanglements in fishing gear, ocean noise, and then also climate change, which is changing their entire marine ecosystem. Now, the conservation efforts are many. The International Whaling Commission exists and they track whales. They're doing ongoing research. There are strict regulations by NOAA where you need to stay 500 yards away from a right whale. And if you happen to come upon one when you're, let's say, doing something like you're out on your personal boat or you are doing something recreational, you need to move 500 yards away. We're also rescuing entangled whales, and we're continuing education by creating documentaries for people to watch so that they'll learn more about the right whale. Now, these positive ecological factors are the ones I already spoke about, how they are keystone species that regulates their marine ecosystem, how their plumes fertilize phytoplankton, and how they do such an amazing job at absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to provide a cleaner environment for everyone. Now, the current and past management practices are these. We already spoke a little bit about this, but we are tracking individual whales over time to monitor their health and population trends. They are very unique. The right whale is very unique in that they have callocytes on their head, and these bumpy white patches are different for each individual whale, and that really helps the scientists to keep track of each individual whale and where they are and what's happening to them. And it really helps them identify their habits, travel patterns, and it's really interesting way to keep track of them. Now, there's also the one about the NOAA fisheries regulation that affects aircrafts, vessels, and like I said, individual people. Even if you're out on a kayak or a surfboard or on your jet ski, you have to stay 500 yards away from a right whale. Continuing on, if you see a right whale or any whale that is in distress, one that is entangled, stranded, sick, or even if you see a dead whale, please report it. We have something called the Atlantic Large Whale Disentanglement Network, and they are spearheaded disentanglement efforts on the East Coast. There is something called the Digital Acoustic monitoring system, which detects whales' sounds using hydrophones, and this information is sent to a lab every 2 hours. It's then reviewed and then posted on public websites for vessels to take stock of. Now, with a 2-hour delay, this could be better, and I'm going to be talking about this down the line because we need to make better efforts to save this whale. Now, our recommended practices are because the ones that we currently have seem to be failing us. And the reason I say that is because the right whale has been experiencing an unusual mortality event since 2017 with 51 known mortalities to date. So we have to do more. Just as of last month, August 2022, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration has proposed changing and reducing regulations surrounding vessel speed. And this would reduce the likelihood of mortalities and serious injuries to endangered right whales. This is huge. Please go to the website at the end of this presentation and leave a comment to support this. It's currently not enough right now to detangle right whales. We really need to keep them from getting tangled in the first place. Scientists and engineers are working on ropeless technology for this. Scientists are also working to create next generation whale detection systems that use thermal infrared cameras that can be installed on ships, and this will instantly allow captains to know if there is a whale in their path, which will hopefully give them enough time to divert in a different direction or slow down. The swag we're going to use is "Whale Miss Them When They're Gone." We're planning on using the hashtag "Whale Miss Them" and TikTok and a TikTok challenge to get the attention of this younger group of people. And the idea is that they're going to make a challenge video and use the hashtag, and that is going to spread like wildfire because people love to make these videos, and people love to follow hashtags, and people love to save animals. So we think that this is going to be a very effective swag campaign. Now, it's really clear that in the future we need to do more. We are currently looking at the Atlantic, the South Atlantic, right whale right now because its numbers have become bolstered in recent years. And so scientists are taking a look at how those numbers have rebounded and hopefully be able to do some sort of a comparative analysis to save the North Atlantic right whale and give us something else to go on. Until the efforts of all these conservationists, scientists, and engineers can start to boost the right whale's numbers, do what you guys can do at home. Please sign that amendment I talked about. Go on the website and spread it to other people, and also just spread the word about the North Atlantic right whale's plight and make your TikTok video. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation today. Please reach out if you have any questions.